At 2:11 in the morning, Mark received a phone call. The caller ID showed his mother's name. That wouldn't be strange except for one small detail. His mother had died 3 years ago. Mark, a 28-year-old software engineer, lived by himself in a small, quiet apartment. He just stared at his phone, completely frozen. The caller ID was undeniable. Mom. And the photo next to it was the one he'd chosen himself, as smiling, with the sun in her eyes from their last family vacation. He couldn't bring himself to answer. It had to be a glitch, a cruel prank, something his mind was making up from lack of sleep. The ringing finally stopped, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the noise. He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. But just 5 seconds later, the phone rang again. Same name, same picture. This time, he let it go to voicemail, his hand trembling slightly. A notification popped up almost instantly. A new message. With a sense of dread, he tapped the screen. The message wasn't a long, rambling, static-filled recording. It was short, clear, and chilling. 3 words, spoken in a voice he knew better than his own. Don't trust him. His heart hammered against his ribs. The voice was hers. But who was him? Mark's mind raced. He needed proof. Something to ground him in reality. He fumbled through his phone, opening his old voicemail archive, a digital graveyard of saved messages from birthdays and holidays past. He found a new message and compared it to one from 4 years ago, a simple happy birthday. Sweetie, she'd left him. He played them back to back. The tone, the gentle lilt, even the soft intake of breath before she spoke, it was identical. It was unmistakably his mother's voice. This was impossible. He was at her funeral. He saw the casket, though it was closed. He held the death certificate in his hands. The car accident was brutal, instantaneous, the police report had said. There was no way she could be making this call. Yet, the timestamp on the voicemail was clear. Today's date, just minutes ago. The digital evidence stared him in the face, defying all logic and reason. He felt a cold sweat form on his brow. Was he losing his mind? Was grief finally breaking him after all these years? He scrolled through his contacts, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Who could he even call to talk about this without sounding completely insane? At exactly 17 a.m., the phone lit up again. Her name, her face. This time, driven by a desperate need for answers, Mark answered. He held the phone to his ear, his knuckles white. "Hello?" he whispered, his voice cracking. At first, there was only static, a crackling hiss that sounded like a storm on the other side of the world. He was about to hang up, convinced it was just a technical error after all. But then, a voice cut through the noise, a faint whisper that made the hair on his arms stand up. Mark listened carefully. It was her. He was so startled he dropped the phone onto his lap. He scrambled to pick it up, putting it on speaker, his hands shaking too much to hold it to his ear. The voice continued from the tiny speaker, tinny and distant, but clear. "He is already inside your life." And then, click, the line went dead. Silence filled the room again. But this time it was different. It was charged, electric, inside his life. What did that mean? Before he could even begin to process the warning, a sharp knock echoed from his front door. 3 loud raps that seemed to shake the entire apartment. Mark froze, his eyes wide, fixed on the door. It was nearly 2:30 in the morning. No one ever came over this late. Every horror movie trope he'd ever seen flashed through his mind. His heart was a drum solo in the deafening silence. Another knock, more insistent this time. Hesitantly, Mark crept to the door and looked through the peephole. A wave of relief washed over him, followed immediately by confusion. Standing outside was Daniel, his best friend since childhood, the man who had practically carried him through the aftermath of his mother's death, the one person he could always count on. Daniel smiled calmly when he saw Mark's eye in the peephole. Mark unlatched the door and opened it. "Hey, you okay?" Daniel asked, his voice full of genuine concern. "You didn't reply to my texts. I got worried." Mark had completely forgotten about his phone buzzing with texts earlier. He was about to explain when his eyes fell on what Daniel was holding. Draped over his friend's arm was a jacket, a familiar tan leather jacket. Mark's breath caught in his throat. It was the exact jacket his mother had been wearing the night she died. He remembered it vividly. He remembered the small, L-shaped tear near the cuff from when it caught on a rose bush in their garden. He saw the same tear now. He saw the same custom-made silver buttons she had sewn on herself. It couldn't be a coincidence. As this horrifying realization dawned on him, his phone, still clutched in his hand, vibrated. A new notification. Another voicemail. With Daniel standing right in front of him, Mark's thumb moved on its own, tapping the notification. The voicemail began to play out loud from the speaker, the volume still turned up. His mother's voice filled the hallway, spectral and unwavering. Daniel was driving. The words hung in the air between them. Mark's mind exploded with a forgotten detail. The accident report. He'd read it a dozen times, trying to make sense of the tragedy. It never mentioned a second person in the car. The official document just said, driver details unclear due to the condition of the vehicle. Everyone assumed his mother was driving alone. The voice from the phone continued, a cold, damning final statement. He switched seats and let me die. Mark slowly lifted his gaze from the phone to his best friend's face. The friendly, concerned smile was gone. It had evaporated, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. The color drained from Daniel's face. He looked from Mark to the phone and back again. There was nowhere to hide from the voice that had just accused him from beyond the grave. The truth, buried for 3 long years, had just clawed its way out. The silence was broken by Daniel's shaky exhale. Mark, I can explain. But the confession was already written all over his face. He admitted everything, the words tumbling out in a desperate, pathetic rush. He had been drinking that night, way over the limit. He'd lost control of the car. When he realized Mark's mother was gone, he panicked. He pulled her from the passenger seat, put her behind the wheel, and ran before anyone arrived. He used his father's connections to smudge the reports, to erase his presence from the scene entirely. He thought the secret was safe, buried forever with her. As he spoke, Mark's phone rang one last time. He looked at the screen Mama and answered, putting it to his ear. He didn't say anything. Daniel watched him, his eyes wide with terror. For a few seconds, there was only the faint static, the sound of the space between worlds. Then, his mother's voice came through, calm and final. Now you know. Daniel flinched as if he'd been struck. He stumbled backward, turned and bolted down the hallway, running from the ghost on the phone. At that exact moment, the distant wail of police sirens began to echo from the street below, growing closer and closer. Daniel was arrested that night. The truth, in all its ugly detail, finally came out. Mark stood alone in his apartment, the first rays of dawn starting to creep through his window. He looked down at his phone one last time. A single, final notification had appeared on the screen. It wasn't a call or a voicemail. It was a text message from Mom. The message was just one word, goodbye. And as he read it, the contact, the name, the photo, the entire entry vanished from his phone as if it had never been there at all. Some truths refused to stay buried, even after death.